Lessons from Wisconsin for Ohio. Welcome to Columbus on the Record. Pundits often look to the results of one election in another state to try to gauge what might happen here in Ohio. This week, they look to Wisconsin. This week's Supreme Court election fits a pattern of divided states seeming to back abortion rights. Democrat Janet Protasiewicz easily beat her Republican opponent. Protasiewicz openly campaigned that she supports abortion rights and ending gerrymandering.
Our state is taking a step forward to a better and brighter future where our rights and freedoms will be protected. And while there is still work to be done, tonight we celebrate this historic victory that has obviously reignited hope in so many of us.
Of course, abortion rights and gerrymandering reform are on the minds of Ohio lawmakers and Ohio voters. Bob Clegg, lots of variables in elections, candidates, the strength of the campaign, turnout. But a lot of conservatives, including the Wall Street Journal editorial board, see this election as a warning for Republicans.
Well, I mean, if you look at Ohio, it really isn't, because we just had an election last November, less than 5 months after the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. And our pro-life, governor, Mike DeWine, won handily. He actually signed the heartbeat bill, which is the law of Ohio right now. His opponent, Nan Whaley, made abortion, to her credit. She made abortion, one of her major issues, but it didn't seem to matter. And we also had, obviously, 3 Supreme Court seats that were up, and all 3 of them were, on the Republican side, were very pro-life. In fact, Sharon Kennedy, who got elected Chief Justice, was criticized for speaking before right-to-life groups a couple years ago. So Ohioans obviously made their voice known, and abortion, if it was an issue, it wasn't that big of an issue.
Derek, is this a bellwether for a possible abortion vote when that is the one issue on the ballot come November, if that happens?
It could be, but, I want to go back to something that Bob had mentioned. The governor got reelected for a number of different reasons. He got reelected because, he handled COVID very well. The economy was in relatively good shape. And voters may not necessarily remember the heartbeat, the bill. So, saying that the heartbeat bill was a reason why he was reelected, I don't know if that's valid.
Laura, this campaign was different, and they were criticized. Protasiewicz was criticized for openly campaigning on issues that she will have to rule on: abortion, redistricting reform. That generally doesn't happen here in Ohio. They kind of dance around the issues, but they don't address them straight on like she did.
Right, she broke some norms, and it could cause her trouble when she's on the bench. We'll see. Generally speaking, you're right. Supreme Court candidates and judicial candidates are very muted in being really overt and stating their position on certain topics, because they may have to rule on those. And the Ohio Supreme Court, it's a 7-member court, and it does make big, impactful decisions on lots of different topics. Boring stuff like taxes and insurance policy, my favorite, open records, but then also some kind of more spicy stuff like abortion and redistricting.
Do you see candidates down the road, Joe Ingles, saying, you know what, it worked for her, maybe I should be a little bit more out front? After all, we are electing judges, so why not know exactly where they stand on these issues?
Well, we saw some changes in November. We saw for the first time party labels next to the justices' names. And we did see the justices, at least, giving some illusion of where they would go. Like you pointed out, they were responding to right to life, material. And so we kind of got an idea of where they are. And maybe it's going that direction in the future.
Do you think Jennifer Brunner would have had a better chance had she used that strategy in Wisconsin?
She may have, but Jennifer Brunner is a very seasoned, campaigner, and I think that she just got caught. Kennedy is a very popular name in Ohio, So, I think that that's one of the reasons why Justice Bruner had a hard time with getting elected. One thing I will say is that people are paying attention to these types of issues. And people are pissed off about not having a choice. People are pissed off about gerrymandering. So I think that that's one of the reasons why this woman was victorious in Wisconsin.
Go ahead, Bob.
Well, one of the things, and I wanted to talk about what Derek just mentioned, people are getting more involved in these races. I looked at the drop-off between the top of the ticket, whether it's a presidential or gubernatorial year, and then the Supreme Court races. The drop-off was somewhere around 20 to 25%, which is 1/5 to 1/4 of the voters weren't going down that far
So they
to
voted
even
for the
vote.
governor, but not
they
for
voted
Supreme
for the
Court.
governor, they voted for the president, but then they didn't vote down there. With this election in 2022, for the first time party labels, the drop-off was 0.5%. That was it. And there were some counties that I looked at where more people voted in the Chief Justice race between Kennedy and Bruner than they voted in the governor's race between DeWine and Whaley, which I found amazing. And here in Ohio, I mean, everybody talked about the party labels. What was it going to make a difference? I think just by the mere fact you had the end of that drop-off is amazing.
People are paying attention to judicial races more, probably because of the recent Supreme Court decisions on abortion and other issues as well. Anyway, Governor DeWine says lawmakers should clarify Ohio's abortion law to make it more, quote, sustainable. DeWine in 2019 signed that so-called heartbeat law, which bans abortion at about 6 weeks. Courts have put that law on hold, and abortion rights supporters are trying to get a proposal on the November ballot that would guarantee abortion rights up to fetal viability. DeWine says the amendment does not represent the opinions of most Ohioans, but polls have shown that a majority of Ohioans do support the Roe standard. DeWine calls on lawmakers to pass legislation, abortion legislation, that will stand up to court challenges and not be overturned by voters. Joe Ingles, you spoke to the governor. Is he looking at a 15-week ban, a 12-week ban? What's he looking for?
You wouldn't give me specifics on that, Mike, so I don't know exactly what he's looking for. But I think one thing that he has said that he's looking for is he wants some clarification for doctors to be able to use. There is an exception in the current ban that allows for the life of a mother, right? But the doctors that, at least that were cited in the case in Hamilton County where this ban was put on hold, the doctors were saying that they didn't know where that line was. Do they have to let a woman get septic before that, her life is in danger? That kind of thing. And DeWine has spoken to wanting more clarification because the law does have some areas where it's vague. That's why it was put on hold. So we'll see. But as far as being specific as to what else might make it more palatable to voters, he didn't go there.
Laura, he signed the heartbeat law, great fanfare. A lot of people behind him, standing behind him. Lieutenant Governor was right next to him. Wholeheartedly supported it in 2019. Now it hasn't even gone into really effect yet, and he's backing away from it.
Well, I think that Governor DeWine would prefer to have the law in place and the ban in place because I think that's his true belief. However, I think he's also a pretty astute politician who's got good instincts, and he sees that the law is out of step with what Ohioans would find acceptable, and he also thinks that the ballot issue it's in the field now, that would also be out of step. So he's trying to see if there's a way to maybe ease off a little bit, signal to the lawmakers that might be a smart move. However, the lawmakers seem much more keen on putting away on going to the ballot in August to blunt that.
Bob, is there a way to convince lawmakers to clarify or maybe soften, if that's the right word, the heartbeat law?
Yeah, I think there is a way, and I think the ballot issue that the pro-abortion people are passing around to get signatures is going to be the motivating factor. I wonder if the governor is hinting at something like having the legislature adopt their own amendment to go on the November ballot that may be a 15 weeks, because of a lot of the polling I saw, the most popular option was 15 weeks. And I wonder if he's going that direction where he wants them to put on an opposing amendment on the November ballot, which they have plenty of time to do, which would be maybe at 15 weeks, but also would require parental consent because the other amendment that's being circulated right now does not have parental consent. And if you poll on that issue alone, it's gigantic in favor of it.
And that's why we're seeing ads.
And when you have
focusing
two,
on
yeah,
that.
and when you have two amendments both on the ballot at the same time, if they both pass, whichever one receives more votes prevails. And I think the thinking would be that a 15-week with parental consent could get more votes than what they're passing out right now.
Derek, do you think conservative lawmakers would go for the 15-week limit? Do you think progressive voters and lawmakers would go for 15 weeks?
That remains to be seen, right? As Bob had mentioned, the 15-week is the preference. The legislature, if the ballot measure was passed by the legislature, they have more control over what the language will look like, right? So that's going to give them a little more leeway, but the 15-week would probably be their preference.
This is not an area that people really want to compromise on, though. I mean, there's people have very hard camps that they don't want to leave.
And also, if you look at the Ohio abortion report, most of the abortions are done in that 15-week or earlier timeline. So you're going to still be allowing most of the abortions. So I could see a lot of people who are against abortion saying, hey, wait, that doesn't accomplish anything, really.
So what was the governor's motivation in floating this out here this week? Is he going to campaign for this? Is he going to push hard for this? Or is he just, offering a little helpful hint or suggestion for lawmakers?
Well, he says he's afraid that the ballot issue will go through and Ohio would be stuck. And he's like, having something that has some more leeway in it is better than being stuck with something that basically would have what we have now. It's kind of a Roe thing. That's what it would be in this if it passes. So he's looking at it from that perspective.
Okay. Lawmakers are on Easter break. When they return, they are expected to again consider whether to hold an August election to change the Constitution. Many Republicans support making it harder to change the state's guiding document. They want to increase the signature requirements and mandate that amendments get 60% of the vote to pass. Of course, lawmakers would have to change a state law that went into effect just this week, and that law outlaws most August elections. Derek Clay, this obviously is admittedly by them an attempt to thwart the November abortion issue. Where do you think those wavering Republicans are right now after coming back from Easter break?
Well, they obviously want this to pass. I mean, there's been a lot of controversy over this issue, because basically you're taking a 50% plus one measure of people to be able to pass a constitutional amendment to 60%. So we're essentially making it harder for people to exercise their rights to vote and to their right to change the Constitution. So yes, it's going to be a very controversial thing when they come back.
Laura, word is about, a dozen lawmakers that are on the fence. Is that what this is going to come down to?
Well, I think it's going to clear the Senate without any problem. I think in the House, though, you just have a lot of these factions within the GOP between the Speaker Jason Stevens camp and the Derek Merrin camp, and then the Democrats are not going to go for it. So the Republicans really have to come together on this. And it's very tricky terrain because, they said that they didn't want to have August elections, that they were too costly and there's too low of turnout. And now they want August elections to serve their own purpose. And they're asking voters to give up voter power that the voters have held for 120 years.
How hard to sell is this?
I think it's pretty hard to sell. Now, let me tell you, I've been in favor of 60% for 15 years. I started liking that idea when the casino guys put their amendment on the ballot, where they got to dictate the whole structure of how much, the state was going to get. They even put in the exact locations for each of the casinos. When I saw that, I thought, come on. This is how easily our system can be played. So I've been a proponent of that whole idea for that long. But I agree with you. I think that's why I mentioned what I think is the other way to deal with this whole abortion issue, which is just put a competing amendment on the November ballot. I think that's a much easier and more explainable than trying to take it up to 60%.
the governor would have to sign a bill into law that would move the August election. Any idea where the governor stands on that?
Oh, he's been he hasn't really answered that straight up. Okay, but here's another thing to consider about this. There are about 175 groups out there who have already come out in opposition of this if it were to make it to the ballot. So, I mean, you would have a lot of turnout from people who don't ordinarily turn out in an August election. And this is not popular among large swaths of people. And if they turn out, they could kill it anyway.
But an August election will have a lower turnout. It just will. There's no president on the ballot. And that's where grassroots organizations can come out, churches. And that's, I think, what the abortion rights opponents are banking on, is that the churches and the motivated folks will come out in August. Will progressives and abortion rights supporters match them?
Anytime you have an election that's outside the norm, that's special, it's going to be a much lower voter turnout, right? So if you have any type of organized effort, you can kill that piece of legislation or whatever's on the ballot. You know, to Joe's point, I mean, there's a number of groups that have come out in opposition to this.
What's the timeline on this? What are the deadlines?
I thought it was May. I thought we were talking sometime in May. If they want to make the August ballot, they have to pass it sometime early May, I want to say, like the first week.
Yeah, like May 10th or so.
Yeah, it's
sticking in my head.
pretty. And that's why another thing about doing it in November is they have more time. The legislature has more time to put their own abortion amendment on a November ballot.
If there were two amendments on the ballot, voters might be confused, and when they're confused, they tend to vote no. Is that a strategy?
No, it could be.
No on both.
Yeah, that could be, but I'll tell you, if those two amendments, two different abortion amendments are on the ballot, you're going to have both sides spending a lot of money educating their people. And it's going to be a vote yes on one, vote no on the other, and for both sides. So I don't think it'll be all that confusing. I think by the time all that money's going to be spent, everybody will kind of know where they're at.
I was just going to say, listen, I think that if this does get to the August ballot, the Republicans are playing Russian roulette with a lot of things here. Because if this measure goes down, it's going to galvanize the folks that are not in favor of abortion, abortion rights being on the ballot. And then that could spill over into House races and other races around the state.
Well, but if the abortion amendment passes in November, guess what? Abortion goes away as an issue. So when all those members are up in 2024, it's no longer an issue.
Will it really go away, Bob?
Well, once, I've always, I was in favor of doing away with Roe v. Wade. You know why? Because I've always said I wanted each individual state to make that decision. And whatever decision Ohio makes, they're going to make. So that's it.
Laura, do you think, regardless of this issue's not going to go away, at least for 10 years anyway?
No, it's not going to go away because it's a hardy evergreen.
Yeah. Europe solved it. Europe solved it in that 12 to 15 week range, and it took them a little while, but here it's a different story. Anyway, tests show that roughly 1/3 of Ohio third graders cannot read proficiently. Governor DeWine blames reading curriculums in many schools for that shortfall. DeWine favors a phonics-based approach to reading instruction, something he and others call a science-based approach. His state budget proposal pushes schools to use a curriculum approved by state education officials rather than using the whole word approach, which relies on memorization and context to help students read. Laura Bischoff, the governor has been on a campaign. He's going from school to school pushing this. What's his motivation?
Well, I think he sees the numbers, and it was 33% of third graders weren't reading at a proficient level. That was pre-pandemic, and now it's up to 40%. And so he says, we've been using this whole language approach for a while in Ohio, and it's not working. And so he's been convinced that changing course to the phonics-based approach is the smart way to go. Learning to read is fundamental for success in academics and in life, and so it's really, and it's crucial that kids, learn this, and it's it kind of fits with the DeWine brand as well, given that his wife is, the major advocate of the Imagination Library and reading and children's issues overall.
Bringing in Dolly Parton to push
Right.
reading literacy. And Joe Ingles, we had the third grade reading guarantee. Apparently it didn't work because we're moving on from that.
Yeah, that went away. Basically, that held kids back if they weren't able to read at a certain level. That went away, and that's likely not to come back. But, the thing is that a lot of the teachers' unions and people representing teachers who actually have to teach, they said, let's take a look at this and really look at what works. Not instead of embracing like one thing, like phonics or whole language, maybe look at everything and take a more, because kids, might use 2 or 3 methods.
Yeah, I think I'm told that the phonics system is much better for children with dyslexia, which is a pretty, predominant disorder. And I think that it's expensive if you want to go with multiple approaches. Either you have the books and the instruction materials for this approach or that approach.
That's why he's allocated quite a bit of money in the budget, Derek.
Yeah, absolutely. Quite a bit of money. So when you look at the governor's budget, there's $64 million for this science of reading curriculum, $43 million over the next 2 years for instruction for teachers, and then another $12 million for literacy coaches, about 100 literacy coaches. This is, the numbers are what they are, as Laura said. So, if hopefully this approach will improve the numbers in Ohio, but that remains to be seen. But, I do believe some balanced approach of this and the other traditional ways of teaching will teach kids the best.
Bob, I remember learning how to read.
Yes.
And I started with Fun with Dick and Jane, which is
Yes,
the
I did
whole
too.
language
I did
approach.
too.
It's repeating, memorization. You see Dick and Jane running, you see the word run, you're associated with that. But when I got to school, I remember my phonics book.
Yeah.
So is there a combination of both?
I mean,
here?
it is. It was a combination. I got to give the governor credit for looking at this and seeing that there is a problem and something's got to be done and done now. I mean, I didn't know until Laura just said that had gone up from 33% up to 40% now. I mean, we can't have almost half our kids in third grade not knowing how to read. So I give him credit. And obviously what we're doing now isn't working. Let's do something different.
Does a curriculum change does the decision belong at the State House, and does it belong in the state budget? Or should this be a separate?
Well, it's going in the budget because it requires an allocation. And, there's certain things that are absolute in this life: death, taxes, and a change in education policy in Ohio. So it's not off-brand to have the legislature weigh in on this.
And he would need the reform bill to become law, the one that basically allows him to set the curriculum, or his education director, rather than the State Board of Education, right, Joe?
Right. This is part of that whole package. I don't know if it could be, done without that, but it's part of what he envisions.
Ohio State has a big stake in this. They've been pioneers in what they call reading recovery, which uses the whole language method to help folks who are behind on reading. What role are they playing in this? Are they advocating behind the scenes, or do we know? Yeah.
I don't know. I know that's been a big anchor. It's been anchored here at Ohio State. And then I think in the phonics camp, it's Jeb Bush has got a stake in it.
Yeah, and the Haslams who own the Browns and the Columbus Crew. And there was a public radio podcast that cast a critical light on the whole language and the business of the whole language, and it's interesting to watch. Anyway, let's get to our final off-the-record parting shots. And Bob Clegg, you go first.
Okay, Mike, guess what? The 2024 campaign has come to Ohio. This coming Thursday, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is going to make not one, but 2 stops here in Ohio. He's going to do Lincoln Day breakfast in Akron, which I'm going to be at. Yeah. And then he's going to go down to Butler County and do a traditional Lincoln Day dinner down there. So, this is the first that I know of that we've gotten some candidate action here in Ohio.
Northeast and Southwest Ohio, one trip. Derek.
The halls of the State House are relatively quiet right now, but that's only because they're on a break for a couple weeks. But when they come back, they are looking at 3,000 plus amendments to the Ohio State budget that they have to consider.
All right, Joe, and you have to cover all of them. Joe Ingles.
Yeah, well, yeah. Governor DeWine's looking at maybe having some sort of merger between marketing and tourism, and we don't know what that looks like, but he said basically they're doing the same thing. They're all promoting Ohio, so stay tuned on that.
All right, and Laura.
Two quick observations. One is this week is the 30th anniversary of the riot at Lucasville, and there's been a lot of changes in Ohio prisons since then, but it remains to be it's a very tough job for prison workers to do day in and day out. And then the other observation is that the expulsion of Larry Householder took 10 months, and the expulsion of the 2 lawmakers in Tennessee took about 10 minutes. So it's an interesting contrast.
Yes, indeed. That'll be a topic of many, many weeks to come. I predict that Fun with Dick and Jane, the book and the movie, will see increased sales if this debate over education policy continues. Anyway, that is Columbus on the Record for this week. We ask you to continue the conversation on Facebook. Follow us there, and you can watch us anytime on your time at our website, wosu.org/COTR, or through the PBS video app. For our crew and for our panel, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.